The Right Side with Doug Billings.
Hello, America. Hello, world. Welcome to The Right Side. Doug Billings here with you. Ladies and gentlemen, something big is happening tonight, and the people who usually control the narrative are already trying to shut the door before it even opens. Tonight, President Trump is going to address the nation. He's made it plain that his speech is going to deal with election integrity, newly declassified intelligence. Thank you, Tulsi Gabbard. Thank you, Kash Patel. And deal with foreign interference of our elections and what the White House is calling real vulnerabilities with the voting machines themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, The Right Side with Doug Billings is now upon you. Are you ready? Let's go.
The Right Side with Doug Billings.
We are not liberal snowflakes who melt away in the face of tragedy, adversity, and challenge. We are a covenant nation under God. And his divine providence is not dead and it's not gone. It is living within each and every one of you. And you will bring it to life in such a way that the world has never seen before. We never back down. We never give up. We march forward.
So President Trump has called this really big news, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to The Right Side, by the way. Thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing. That's how we get the truth out. Head over to DougBillings.us, DougBillings.us, and prayerfully consider donating to the program over there. But already, before a single word of President Trump's speech tonight is spoken, the left is demanding that the networks refuse to put it on the air. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, one of the members of the hierarchy of kooks, she came right out and said television networks have an ethical obligation not to air it. Her exact words were that they shouldn't be contributing to any platforming of lies about our election, and that they have an ethical obligation to not air things that undermine our election, that are rooted in evidence and fact. Now, pause right there with me for a second, ladies and gentlemen, and think about what that actually means. AOC, a member of Congress, is telling private news organizations that they should pre-censor the president of the United States on a matter of national security before anybody has even heard the evidence. She's not saying, I want to debate him. She's not saying, I want to fact check him. She's saying that the American people, you, shouldn't be allowed to hear it all. Now, if you ask me, that's not confidence, that's fear. If the system was as airtight as they've spent years telling us that it is, if every machine were secure and every foreign actor was kept completely out, then the smartest play for them would be to let the president talk and then destroy his claims with facts afterwards. But instead, they're trying to keep the microphone turned off. And that tells you everything that you need to know about how solid they actually feel their position is. So this is the same crowd, by the way, that spent years lecturing the rest of us about democracy and the sacred right of the people to hear every side of every story. Well, the second that that principle might work against them, the principle disappears. And it's amazing how fast free speech becomes dangerous when the speech might make people ask hard questions about how we run our elections. Ladies and gentlemen, this is bigger than any one speech. I want to be clear about that. What we're watching tonight is a test. Can a sitting president still speak directly to the country about the security of the ballot, or do the gatekeepers get to decide in advance that certain topics are off limits? Because if they can successfully pressure networks to block out a presidential address on election integrity, then the next time is going to be easier. And the time after that, it's going to become routine. Now, I don't have any inclination at all that any network is not going to air President Trump's speech. If they do, they'll hear from us tomorrow. But while all of that noise is swirling around tonight's speech, something just important happened today on Capitol Hill. The House didn't just pass another spending bill today. They attached the Save America Act straight onto a major national security appropriations package. That's the bill In case you're from Raytown, Missouri, the Save America Act requires proof of citizenship to register to vote in federal elections, and it demands photo ID at the polls. All right. By slipping it into the must-pass legislation that they did today, they've created a path that could force the Senate to deal with it under simpler majority rules instead of getting buried in a filibuster graveyard. So this is great news. Now, we're going to see how many rhinos we have in the Senate, but why does this matter? Because for years, we've watched one side treat election security like it's some kind of an optional suggestion. They lecture us about democracy while fighting tooth and nail against the most basic common sense protections that would make sure only American citizens are deciding American elections. Democracy. They're all about democracy. And they'll never say the word republic, because we're not a democracy. You all know that. But the radical liberal communist socialists, formerly known as Democrat Party, are under orders. And I'm not even kidding about this. They're under orders to never utter the word republic. God save the republic. God bless the republic. They'll never say anything like that. The reason is, and you're going to think I'm nuts, it's the root word of the word Republican. And we have in this country a Republican form of government. So they're under orders not to say it. They say instead democracy. That Doug Billings, did you see him, the right side? They're a threat to democracy. Well, we're not a democracy. We're a republic, but, I digress. The Save America Act isn't some kind of a radical overhaul either. It's straightforward. You have to prove you're a citizen to register to vote, and you have to show your ID in order to vote. Most Americans, upwards of 86, 87%, already think that sounds completely normal. But to the open borders crowd and their allies in Congress and the media, it's treated like some kind of an existential threat. This legislative move today from Mike Johnson in the House, thank you, Speaker Johnson, shows something important about the current state of play in America. Republicans in the House aren't waiting around anymore for perfect conditions. They're using the tools that they have, attaching real election integrity measures to bills that the Senate can't easily ignore. It's the kind of strategic thinking that we've needed for a long time. And instead of letting these priorities die in committees or get stalled forever, they're forcing the issue onto the table when the other side has to deal with it. So, my friends, this is about restoring the American people's faith in their vote and making sure that it actually counts. When you've got millions of non-citizens in this country, and when you've got loose mail-in ballot rules with no real verification in too many places, you start to wonder. And people, when people begin to wonder, that wonder sometimes turns into widespread doubt. And when widespread doubt becomes an issue, you've got a problem that goes way beyond any single election. You've got a crisis of legitimacy. And crises of legitimacy don't stay contained. They bleed into everything else. Trust in institutions, willingness to accept outcomes, and even basic social cohesion. I mean, just look at the history. Countries that have let their election systems become porous eventually face real consequences. You don't need to go back to ancient Rome to see any of this. Just look at places where corruption at the ballot box became normalized. The people lose confidence. Strong men rise up promising to fix it, or the whole system fractures. We're not there yet in America, thank God. America's not on our deathbed. I'm not a doomer, but we're seeing the early warning signs. And the good news is that we still have a chance to course correct while we've got the leaders in place right now willing to fight it. All right. So let's get down to the heart of what's really going on in America. When President Trump steps to the microphone tonight, he's not just going to be talking about politics as usual. He's addressing something that cuts to the core of whether this republic can still govern itself. We're going to have news tonight about newly declassified intelligence. Again, thanks Tulsi Gabbard, thanks Kash Patel. Newly declassified intelligence, reportedly showing that serious foreign efforts to interfere in our elections happened, along with real vulnerabilities in the voting machines that many states still rely on. So this isn't ancient history. This is 2020, 2022, in 2024. This is current. It's ongoing risk as we head into another election cycle. So you all know how this works. Adversaries like China and Iran and Russia, they don't need to storm the beaches to take us over. They don't need tanks rolling down Main Street. This is not the movie Red Dawn, okay, where we see paratroopers from other countries landing in our streets. All they need to do is create enough doubt, enough chaos, and enough exploitable weaknesses in our systems that the American people begin to question whether their voice actually mattered. You've seen it today because there's a lot of people in 2020 who said, well, I'm not going to vote anymore because the system is rigged, and so I am not going to vote. That was the worst. By the way, that is not patriotic. We offered them grace. We're going to welcome them back. But to say I'm not going to participate in the system because I think it's rigged is anti-American, and I'll tell you why. We believe that our rights come from God in this conservative world of ours, and we believe that the military goes to the battlefield sometimes to protect those rights that come to us from God. We do not honor God by not participating in the rights that he's given us. And we certainly don't honor the military who go to the battlefield and sometimes offer the ultimate sacrifice to protect the rights that come to us from God. We always participate in the system as conservatives. We always participate. So that's, when you have threats internally, and other adversaries can weaken the system and take over and infiltrate, that's the cheap, asymmetric way to weaken a superpower from within. And the intelligence community has been warning about this for years, even if some people in Washington prefer to pretend that this is all some sort of a big conspiracy theory. The quiet discussions right now inside of the Trump administration about emergency authorities are making it perfectly clear and make perfect sense in that context. So will we see emergency powers enacted tonight? Just maybe. When you have foreign actors probing election infrastructures with machines that have little verification and a lot of problems, known flaws that could be exploited, treating it like a normal regulatory issue is the height of irresponsibility. So there may be other measures invoked tonight. We'll see. National security is not optional. Protecting the mechanism by which we choose our leaders is every bit as critical as protecting our power grid or our financial systems and our lives. I mean, you wouldn't leave the front door wide open while you're still talking about whether or not locks are necessary. But that's exactly how too many people have approached election security for way too long. Think about the historical parallel for a minute, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, during the Cold War, we poured enormous resources into making sure that the Soviet Union and its agents couldn't infiltrate our institutions. Back then, we understood that subversion from within was just as dangerous as a direct attack. Today, the threats are different. I mean, cyber and influence operations, supply chain compromises, voting technologies, and all of that. But the principle is exactly the same. A nation that can't secure its elections is a nation that can't secure its future, period. That's why tonight's speech carries so much weight. The president has to access the information that he's been given. The rest of us don't have this information yet. When he lays it out, we're going to see whether the country finally gets serious about closing these gaps or whether we keep kicking the can down the road while our adversaries keep testing the fences. The good news is that we've already started moving in the right direction. There's a lot of states out there that have implemented strict voter ID and citizenship verification, showing up that it can be done without suppressing legitimate votes. Turnout holds steady in these states, confidence goes up, and the system gets stronger. So it does work. It's not oppression. It's not discriminatory. It works. But we've got to be honest about that resistance over there from the left, because some of them treat any attempt to harden our elections as an attack on democracy itself. They're convinced, because they've convinced themselves, and they've tried to convince everybody else, that asking people to provide proof that they're citizens before they vote is somehow discriminatory. That's just not I mean, it's not just wrong, it's insulting to every legal immigrant who went through the proper process to become an American. And it's insulting to every citizen who plays by the rules. And I think you agree that it reveals an entire worldview of the radical left that sees the electorate as something to be expanded and managed instead of protected and trusted. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is bigger than partisanship. When foreign governments believe they can influence or cast doubt on our elections, they're attacking the very idea of self-government. That's why election integrity has got to be treated as a national security priority. It's not a left versus right issue. Above any other issue that you have passion for, whether it's the right to life, the Second Amendment, law and order, justice, whatever it might be, the right of election integrity is number one. Because if we don't get election integrity right, your passion for the right to life or the Second Amendment or whatever other issue you like or care about won't matter. The intelligence doesn't care about party registration, and the vulnerabilities don't care about voter rolls before they try to exploit them. They don't check. The vulnerabilities don't walk around and say and have a self-check box that says, are these voter rolls accurate? Is everybody on this list an American citizen? This is about whether the United States of America can continue as a sovereign nation where the people, not foreign actors and not bureaucratic insiders, not anybody else, decide who leads us. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. We've got to try to do the best we can with the information that we have. And that means demanding full transparency on these intelligence findings. And it means backing the legislative efforts like the Save America Act that finally put real safeguards in place. And it means rejecting this ridiculous notion that securing the ballot is somehow anti-democratic. The opposition is true. It's real. And the more secure the process, the more legitimate the outcome and the stronger our republic becomes. Believe that. There's real hope here, by the way. We've got a president who's willing to put this issue front and center. We've got majorities in the House and in the Senate, not always doing it quickly and fastly enough, but finally willing at least to look and be creative with legislative strategies to get things done. And we've got the American people who, when they understand what's at stake here, they consistently support common sense measures to protect the vote. So the momentum is building. The old excuses are wearing thin. And tonight, we may get more pieces of the puzzle that make it impossible for the deniers of all of this to keep pretending nothing's wrong. That's the kind of moment where the country either steps up or slides further into managed decline. I don't believe we're sliding. I believe we're in the middle of a course correction. It's messy. Yeah, it's contentious. Absolutely. But it's necessary. And when you look at the broader picture, the border security gains, the push for energy dominance, the support of law and order, the willingness to confront adversaries directly, you see a pattern. The Trump administration understands that strength abroad requires strength and confidence at home. And nothing undermines confidence like doubts about the integrity of our elections. So as you watch Trump's speech tonight, listen carefully, don't just hear the headlines, and ask yourself what it reveals about the state of play in America. Are we serious about self-government, or are we going to keep playing games while the world watches? I think the answer is clear. The American people are ready to get serious, and leaders who stand in the way of all of this that are going to find themselves, I think, increasingly isolated, primaried, and eliminated through the ballot box itself. We've got the tools. We've got the majority. We've got the moment. Now we've got to deliver for a time such as this. That's what tonight is really about. And let's talk straight about what's really on the line here, folks, because if we keep treating election integrity like it's some kind of optional side issue, or worse, like it's dangerous to even discuss, we're not just risking a bad election cycle, we're risking the slow unraveling of the entire American experiment. Once enough people conclude that the game is rigged, or even that it might be rigged, the trust that holds this country together starts to erode in ways that are hard to repair. And you see it already in the way people talk to each other. Neighbors who used to disagree on policy now wonder if the other side is even playing fair. Institutions that once commanded respect now face constant skepticism. And that skepticism doesn't stay politely contained in the voting booth. It spills over into everything. How we view the courts, how we view law enforcement, how we view the basic legitimacy of the government itself. A republic can survive a lot of things, folks, but it can't survive a widespread belief that the people's will no longer determines the country's direction. And that's why the fight we're in right now isn't just political, it's foundational. When President Trump speaks tonight, and when the House forces the Save America Act forward, they're not engaging in partisan gamemanship. They're trying to plug the holes before the whole structure weakens any further. The downstream effects of continued neglect are easy to see if you look honestly at history. Nations that lose confidence in their electoral process don't suddenly, snap back to health. They either reform dramatically or they slide into managed decline where the ruling class keeps power while the public just checks out. We've watched pieces of that story play out in other places. When people feel like their votes don't count, cynicism takes over. Participation drops among those who still believe in the system, while the organized interests who know how to work those gaps gain even more influence. And so then before long, you don't have a government of the people anymore. You've got a government by whoever is best at navigating the loopholes. And that's not the country that the founders envisioned, and it's not the country that most Americans want to leave to their children. But here's the good news, my friends. We're not there yet. America is not on her deathbed. We still have the chance to course correct, and the momentum is clearly building for us. More states are adopting stricter verification, more citizens are paying attention, and more leaders are finally willing to treat election security as the national security issue that it is. And tonight's address could be another important step in that awakening. When the American people hear directly about the intelligence and the vulnerabilities, when they see the legislative moves that are happening in real time, the old dismissals lose their power. That's how republics renew themselves from within, not through perfection, but through honest reckoning and determined patriotism. We've done it before in our history. The challenges might have seemed overwhelming, but we can do it again. The key is refusing to let the conversation be shut down before it even starts. That's why the attempts to censor or to preempt tonight's speech are so revealing. They don't want the American people weighing the evidence for themselves. They want to keep control of the narrative. Ladies and gentlemen, we're better than that. We are capable of hearing hard truths and taking action on them. We're capable of demanding that our election system reflect the simple principle that only citizens should choose our leaders, and that every legitimate vote should count while illegitimate ones are kept out. That's not extremism. That's basic self-government. And so the path forward, I think, is clear. Support the legislative efforts that are moving right now, demand full transparency on the intelligence, hold every elected official accountable, regardless of party, whether they're strengthening the system or weakening it, and above all else, stay engaged. The people who love this country far outnumber the ones who want to transform it beyond recognition. When we act like it, when we refuse to be silenced or intimidated, we shift the balance. And I believe we're in one of those pivotal seasons right now where America gets to remember who she really is. Not a perfect nation, but a resilient one. Not a place where the elites decide everything, but a place where the people still hold the ultimate authority. And that authority only means something if the process is worthy of it. So as I wrap up, take that spirit into the rest of the day and evening tonight. Watch tonight's address to the nation with clear eyes. Talk to your neighbors and friends about what real election integrity looks like. And remember that the fight we're in is not about anger. It's about restoration. It's about making sure that the next generation inherits a republic where their voice still matters, where their vote still counts, and, where the United States of America remains that shining city on a hill, because we refuse to let it dim while our watch is in play. We've got the tools, we've got the moment, and now we've got to keep pushing. Please like, share, and follow. Subscribe, share, because that's how the algorithm gets ignited. More people get the truth. Prayerfully consider donating to the show at dougbillings.us. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, God bless you. God bless your families. God bless the United States of America. We are in this thing together. Believe it. For the Republic. Cheers.
The Right Side with Doug Billings.